y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani,
And I'm Sam.
and we are back to another MMIW
Mhm.
episode. This is the top of the month.
Yeah.
So the first two episodes in which we discussed the MMIW movement, there were multiple victims within them. And for the next few, I'm going to talk about pretty specific cases, ones that I could find either good information on or, they have a book that helps provide some of the reference material.
hmm
And so this first one is that of Tina Fontaine.
That name is familiar to me.
Is it?
Yeah.
It wasn't as familiar to me as the next one we'll talk about.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of. So on August 17th, 2014, the body of 15-year-old Tina was pulled from Red River in Winnipeg. She was found after a boat's propeller dislodged her from the riverbed. After that, Dwayne Oliver and his 10-year-old son, who were out watching the search for someone else actually, who had walked into the river days prior, found a life preserver. They went to pick it up when Dwayne noted something else in the river close by, finding a person wrapped in a tan-colored blanket and immediately calling the police. So Tina was wrapped up in a duvet cover that was packed with rocks and zipped up.
Mm.
She was 5'3" and about 73 pounds
Oh my
and was
God.
fully clothed at the time. She was bloated, but there was a distinctive tattoo on her back that was a memorial piece. There were no broken bones, but significant damage to the face. Unfortunately, it couldn't be determined if it was perimortem injuries or the result of decomposition and hitting rocks within the water. Detective O'Donovan was assigned the case, and he meant to do a thorough job of it. But before we get into all that, let's discuss how we got here. Tina was raised by her great aunt, Thelma Favell. Thelma had a history of fostering children, many of which were within her own family. Before Tina, Thelma fostered her father, Eugene Fontaine, or Gino. Gino lived in Winnipeg in his 20s and got heavy into drinking and drug use after leaving, his foster mother's house. At 23, he started seeing a 12-year-old Cree named Valentina Duck. When she was 17, on January 1st, 1999, Valentina and Gino's daughter, Tina, was born.
Oh.
A year later, sister Sarah came into the world. In 2001, Gino and Valentina split and the children entered the Child and Family Services, or CFS system. The girls were given to Eugene, but his health started to decline. In 2004, he was still drinking and additionally had cancer of the lymph nodes. So he turned to Thelma for help. And with that, when Tina was 5 and Sarah was 4, Thelma became their legal guardian.
Mm.
As Tina grew, she found that she had a proclivity for wanting to help children. And then tragedy struck on October 31st, 2011, when Gino was found murdered.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. He had been on a bender when he argued with the two men that he was with, and in turn, the men tied Gino up behind a shed where he was beaten and kicked in the head, and then left, ultimately succumbing to his injuries.
Oh, man.
His death hit both girls pretty hard, but Tina began to struggle with anger. She became a tough defender of her little sister Sarah, and she began to fight at school. Thelma ended up pulling both girls from the school they were on in the reserve that they lived at and transferred them to public school. The new location allowed Tina to relax and focus. She began to excel in math and science and grew her friend group, but her spark remained.
There's so many, I feel like we could do an episode of Gino, even.
Yeah.
I feel for him.
Yeah. I think, because there's several cases where there's, men involved, but because I want to focus on the women, I don't
Right.
know, it's hard.
Yeah. He reminds me of, some of the patients I had in Seattle. Even though just such a brief, description of who he is right there, but, there were so many Indigenous men that I would work with in my, outreach program that were heavy drinkers
Mm-hmm.
who like would get diagnosed with cancer a lot of times. I'm thinking of 5 different men right now. One in particular who I just was very like protective over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they didn't want to interact with the health system because the health system doesn't really listen
Yeah.
to them quite the same way. And then there's just this like generational trauma that they bring with them, and they would get beaten up all the time whenever they were drinking.
Yeah.
And it just made like I feel like I know who Gino is just by the brief description we had of him early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 2013, Tina ran away from home, heading to Winnipeg to see her mother. The two hadn't spoken since um, Thelma became Tina's guardian, really, until Valentina reached out after Gino's funeral, and the pair, kind of started talking
Hmm.
again, but only on the phone. Um, she started smoking weed and posted sexually explicit photographs from men that she had talked to that lived in Winnipeg. And for her 15th birthday, got that memorial tattoo of her father's name along with the birth and death dates and angel wings.
Hmm.
So, for her birthday, she wanted to go to Winnipeg to try and reconnect with Valentina. And at first, Thelma was like, no,
Right.
like, no. But I think with all this pushback, and kind of Tina acting out, she was like, all right, well, let
Maybe.
me, maybe it'd be okay.
Right.
But first, she made sure, like, through her contacts through like the CFS system, she made sure that Valentina was sober and stable. And after finding out that she was at the time, Thelma agreed to let her go. And so in February, Tina and Sarah went to visit Valentina in Winnipeg, which is about an hour and a half from their home.
Okay.
Valentina lived with an older man and had other daughters at this time. And when they got back, Tina and Sarah said that they had a good visit and spoke fondly of their younger half sisters. And in total, she had 7 siblings.
Oh, wow.
hmm But this didn't do much for Aunt Tina's stability, and she ended up having a string of runaways after this event. On March 2nd, Tina fled to Winnipeg, being brought home by police after Thelma called them. Then again, in April, she ran off, later being brought home by a young man she met while in Winnipeg. This time, Thelma called CFS and asked them to take Tina into their care as she was unable to manage her behaviors. And I mean, like, in like a counseling aspect, like,
Hmm.
can you kind of guide this child? She wasn't trying to get rid of Tina.
Right.
She was trying to get help for her, like
Hmm.
mental health resources type of thing. Um, so in May, a social worker arranged a counseling, but it was 75 kilometers away, and she just couldn't make it, so she didn't go. And Tina asked Thelma to simply allow her more time with Valentina, and the pair came up with a deal. Tina could visit Valentina for a week in the summer holiday if she kept her grades up. And Tina ended up, making good on her deal. And on June 30th, both Tina and Sarah were set to go to Winnipeg, with Samantha and Brian, Thelma's biological children, who were going to drive them. But Sarah decided last minute she wasn't comfortable going, and so it was simply Tina that left with $60 and a prepaid phone card given to her by Thelma as a precaution.
Hmm.
In the meantime, Valentina had returned to drugs and lost custody of her children. She even lost the house, that ended up being boarded up when the trio arrived. But undeterred, Tina asked to be dropped off at Valentina's sister's house, and her sister was there and like took her in
Yeah.
at the time. But after a week of silence, Thelma got worried, and so she called Valentina's house, but the phone was disconnected. So she and husband Joe drove to Winnipeg, finding Valentina's house
All boarded.
vacant.
Yeah.
She continued to search for Tina. Failing to find her, she called CFS, and a CFS worker was able to finally find Valentina, but she didn't have
Tina.
Tina with her at the time. From there, Thelma contacted the RCMP to report Tina missing, which again, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I think I've said it before in
Hmm.
previous episodes, just in case somebody forgot. That's what it is. At the same time, Sarah received a message on Facebook from Tina with a black eye and scratched face. The text read, quote, Chubbs, look what our mom did to me, end quote.
Oh.
hmm This led to them finding out that Valentina got drunk and beat Tina, then kicked her out before they had gotten into
Oh,
contact with Valentina.
so sad.
Sarah, so again, sister Sarah, soon received a second message from Tina, quote, tell mama and papa I love them, but I'm not ready to come home, end quote. Thelma and Joe didn't give up. They went to Winnipeg and searched the malls and other shopping areas. And throughout it all, Thelma attempted to work with both CFS and RCMP, but CFS seemed to provide little help. All in all, Tina was registered as missing by Thelma 5 times, and this part's pretty
Mm.
confusing. Um, so one source reported that the last time she went missing was on August 9th when she disappeared from a city center hotel where CFS had placed her, but Thelma was unaware that she was even in the hotel until after she went missing again. And so it sounds a lot like they would find her, put her in like shelter or housing, but they had no legal authority to hold her. So if she
Hmm.
walked out, she walked out. And then they would just simply report her as missing again, which is why we get these multiple missing, even though she has never come home.
Right. Like by the time they let Thelma know, we put her up in the Holiday Inn or whatever, like
She's gone again.
then Thelma goes to get her and then she's gone.
hmm
Yeah.
Or they, and they're, well, it's not just that. They knew that she walked out on several occasions and they would report the last thing that she was wearing because,
Yeah.
again, they have no authority to actually stop
Stop
her.
her. Right.
But so all they could do is, try and keep her clothed in like warm clothing. At one point, she gets like a sweater from one of the workers. Um, and they just report what clothes she's wearing when she leaves and reports it to police.
She was a minor still, right?
hmm
Seems like you would have authority to stop her.
I know. I don't know the Canadian laws if
Yeah.
we're going to be. They did. It sounded so confusing, but in all of the sources, it says that they were not allowed to like hold her.
Yeah.
The afternoon that Tina was found, Thelma's grandniece told her that Facebook was reporting a body in the Red River. The next day, two RCMP officers officially did inform her that it was Tina.
That
Um,
would be like that phone call that you just sort of always, I think, when you have this troubled youth running away from you and then they keep going missing. I think there'd just be a little bit of that, like always in your head, like, when am I going to get the awful phone call that
mhm.
something horrible has happened?
Yeah,
Which is, you wouldn't want to think that. I think you'd push that out of your head as much as you can, but you just know the realities of the world as an adult. The longer
hmm
you've been alive, the worse crap you've seen.
yeah,
And I think it would just be really tough to go, oh, this 75-pound girl is running around by herself.
yeah.
Like,
I think it would be even tougher because it was such a sharp shift. Like
hmm.
after her dad died is kind of when this picked off. She had been doing okay, had been coping fairly well until the loss of her dad, which I mean, of course, emotional trauma, what teenager, we're not blaming Tina for it, but
Hmm.
I think that would be even harder because you don't have a base of this happening and how to respond to it. And it's brand new territory and it
Right.
escalates so fast that you're like, how do I catch up to this?
And even the best experts in the world, like the humans are complicated and
Mhm,
everyone's different and handle and deal with trauma differently. So
mhm.
it's like to expect Thelma, who also has 6 other kids that she's like fostering. I don't know if it was all like at the same time or
No, it
just,
wasn't. It
but
sounds
like,
like, so Tina and Sarah, she had not fostered, I think, kind of the younger ones. For a while, she had
hmm,
started to shift towards teenagers as she got older. And so when Tina and Sarah entered her life, it had been a long time since she had had like little ones.
like
And I mean, they're
kids.
not young
Yeah.
at this, they're young, but
Right.
they're now teenagers themselves. But um, no, she hadn't had like that. It doesn't sound like that many kids for a while.
Yeah.
Um, kind of backed off with age, which is fair. I
Hmm.
mean, if you're getting into the older ages, you're like, I just don't have the energy to quite do so many all at
Yeah.
one time. But
And it's also like the change in just like life for a teenager from like early 2000s to like mid 2000s is wild. Like
Mhm.
everything that started to happen at that time with technology and the internet and like the fact that, taking pictures of yourself that you're now sending to people and things like that. That wasn't happening previous to like just a few years before. So
Yeah.
if you were someone who was fostering kids previously before MySpace and Facebook and like these dangerous platforms that you
Mhm.
know nothing about, it would have been a game changer.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't, life was different.
Yeah. It would have been a lot to manage, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Um, all right, now let's get back to the investigation and into what happened to Tina and how she ended up in the duvet cover dumped in the Red River. The initial analysis of DNA yielded nothing on like Tina and on the duvet cover. And so,
Real quick, how long was the time from when she was like last reported missing, give or take? Like, I know it was a little convoluted, but then to the time that like body was found, was it?
so she was reported missing. Well, she had been reported last seen officially August 9th, they think. And then the body is found August 17th.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so where was I? You
Sorry.
see,
I
I
know.
know you
I
do this to
threw you
me
off.
every
I threw
time.
you off. I was trying to remember, but I feel like that's an important detail not to just sort of guess.
It
Like,
is. It's okay. So when the DNA yielded nothing at first, the samples were sent to a private lab that specialized in mitochondrial DNA. There it was determined that several of hairs that were found with her, like in the duvet,
hmm.
um, were hers and were excluded, but multiple hairs were not, and the lab was able to identify at least 8 unknown
Oh,
profiles.
wow.
The duvet cover itself was investigated, and it was determined to be from a Costco in Canada. The barcode on it belonged to 4 different types of duvet covers, and the Winnipeg branch had sold 864 of them. An additional 29 were sent to a surplus store on Main Street. Of the 864, only 100 bought were this Chloe green pattern that they decided was
Hmm.
what Tina was found in. Still, O'Donovan tracked down as many as they could, and out of the 189 showed police they still had it. Some even took pictures of it and sent them in. Like if
Could
they couldn't
you?
find it originally, like this is so Canadian. Like some of them, because they cabins like hunting cabins, and they're like, oh,
Right.
it's at my hunting cabin, and they would drive to the hunting cabin and take a picture and send it. Meanwhile, they don't know why police are asking for this duvet cover. It
Right.
was never told to them. They're like, we just need to know,
Do you have it?
do you have it?
And if
You
you
bought
can
it.
prove that you've got it, that
Yeah.
would be great.
Hmm.
Could you imagine though, like buying the amount of like pillowcases and duvet covers and things like that that I've bought? Like, I can't even imagine getting a knock on my door, like from police officers, and
Yeah.
they're asking me to see a blanket. I now would know that, oh, crap, something
Something
is
happened.
bad. And then I really would hope that I still had it.
Yeah, it's really funny because last night I almost threw out. I have a duvet cover and it, um, I don't know what it got on it, but it was like from a washing machine. Like the washing machine had a like weird line on it, and it
Uh-huh.
had like made a line on the duvet cover,
Yeah.
and it just is stuck there, and it looks atrocious. And I almost threw it out last night, and now that we're talking about this, I'm like, oh my God,
Like, yeah,
what if I need
what if
that
I
for
need
me?
it to prove I'm innocent someday?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my
I
goodness.
don't think we have to worry about that.
No, but the timing of things was
Yeah.
just funny because I thought of this
Yeah.
case and I was like, "Oh, well, dang." And you never know. You just
I
never
know.
know.
You never know.
So 5 reported to have returned theirs back to Costco, and 4 said that the covers were either too remote in cabins or other locations that weren't easily accessible. And again, they didn't know why. So some of them were like, I can't just fly my plane to go to
Right.
this, dry cabin for to take a picture for you.
Right.
Like that's a bit excessive. And I, I don't know, maybe if they were like, oh, it's for a murder investigation, like, yeah, I'll do it. But that'd be a hard press just to do it for
Yeah.
them. Um, And two also said they had given their bedding to Value Village, which is a thrift shop, and this avenue so ended up becoming a dead end. O'Donovan still set about interviewing people and first started with Tina's aunt, Angie Duck, who recalled Tina coming over and then immediately calling Valentina, who came and picked her up after she was dropped off by her Brian, and I can't think of the woman's name now. I just forgot it. Thelma's children.
Thelma.
No, Thelma's children.
Oh.
And about a week later, Tina had come back to her house with Larry, and Larry was the same boy that dropped her off when she was the runaway the second time. He was another Indigenous boy.
Okay.
She saw her last when she came over on July 22nd with a man she introduced as her boyfriend, Cody. I should say teenager. He's not super old, I think. Tina posted a picture of their get-together on Facebook, which is why she remembered like the specific date of it being July 22nd. The next evening, Angie saw her walk by the house, but Tina didn't come in or even say hello. And while O'Donovan struggled to find Valentina, he was able to locate on-again, off-again boyfriend of Valentina, Joseph. And Joseph recalled seeing Tina a few times, many of which were with Cody. The last time was in late July or early August, in which they spent the night on his couch before taking off again the next day. Family friend Steve Whitehurst reported that the pair had visited his house several times. And she, at the time, Tina, had mentioned staying at a shelter but didn't like it. Next, Lena Fontaine, another aunt, had also seen Tina on multiple occasions. The last time was the beginning of August when she stayed at her house for 2 nights. So people, like, as they're coming forward, it's all these like spot interviews and they're trying to put together this timeline, and it's friends and family that are like, yeah, we saw her. She hung out for like a day.
They definitely need to find this Cody.
They do.
Yeah.
Friend Larry was interviewed as well and told detectives he last saw Tina at Portage Place, a shopping mall where they, along with Cody, hung out. Cody was tracked down and determined to be Cody Mason, an 18-year-old who had come into town with his father from northern Manitoba Reserve of St. Teresa Point First Nations. But Cody and his father had left on August 6th, confirmed by airlines. The staff at the hotel in which the father and son stayed while in town also confirmed seeing Tina after Cody had left town. And it sounds like they came in, the dad needed some medical treatment or something, so they were flown in, got treated, and then went home.
Okay.
The detectives found the shelter Tina stayed, the Nindawa Group Home, a youth shelter. She had been referred there on July 23rd by CFS. So this is one of the times that she was like sent there. But she failed to make curfew on July 26th, and so the staff reported her missing. But days later, she returned only to walk out on July 29th, saying she was going to stay with an aunt. On August 6th, Robert Sango, a former bank robber,
Oh, God.
still out on parole, reported seeing Tina at a bus stop he liked to sit at before curfew. So I guess he's just like every night after work, he'd go sit at this bus stop before he had to go into his probably halfway house.
Yeah, like report back. Yeah.
And had to be in for the night. And he just was like, nope, this is my fresh air. And she used the payphone near them and then came and sat by him and began to cry, telling the man that an older man was becoming aggressive with her when left alone at a friend's house. Robert reported that he knew after seeing her picture in the paper that he knew it was her. And so O'Donovan followed up on the call that she had made and found out that it was a 911 call that she had made at the bus stop.
Whoa.
And so they actually could hear her. And Tina was heard stating a blue truck was stolen and said it was stolen by a man named Sebastian. She's just like, I think she was trying to get him caught to leave her alone, essentially, is what it sounded like. On August 8th, Tina was found down behind a car in a parking lot and taken to the hospital. There, she was determined to have alcohol, amphetamines, marijuana, and cocaine in her system.
Holy moly.
She had soiled herself, so she was cleaned up and given hospital pants to wear. And later that day, she left. So I guess she was, pretty out of it at first. And then as soon as she woke up, she's like, I'm leaving, and
It's
just
time to go.
bounced. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
She did end up being picked up by Kimberly Shute, a CFS worker, and Kimberly took her to McDonald's and then chatted with her as they drove to a Best Western charter house. During the drive, Tina offhandedly said that she was going to go hang out with a man named Sebastian, an older meth user that she knew.
Mm.
Tina gave no further information, and so she was handed off to a private agency, Complete Care, and worker Ngozi Eka, sorry, who checked her into the room. Still, Tina decided to go out that evening and promised to make the 11 p.m. curfew. And again, while the worker wasn't able to stop her, she did note the clothing she was in, and after Tina failed to make curfew, reported her as missing.
Mm.
The clothing was the same set she was found in 2 weeks later.
This would be such a hard case.
It is.
It'd be really difficult
It
to.
is. Several witnesses did come forward with tips, but none were fruitful, and as such, the police made a statement urging the public to come forward with information in regards to, Tina's whereabouts leading up to her death.
Mhm.
And it does sound like O'Donovan sounds like he did a really good job.
Mhm.
He thoroughly investigated, and this was a time where there was a lot going on in Canada. I mean, the movements are kind of ramping up trying to get support for all these missing Indigenous women.
Mhm.
There's multiple cases going on that are sparking national outrage at this time. And so there was a spotlight on,
Trying to make sure that these were getting solved.
Mhm,
Yeah.
which is why we have so much information about this
Yeah.
case specifically, because this was at a time where it was just, in public eye all the time. And people are starting to see, this is a 15-year-old girl. She weighed 73
Right.
pounds. Why is she out in the
She was part of
streets?
the system.
Yeah.
You had hands on her regularly.
And this
Find
still
her.
happened.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
did this happen?
Yeah.
Find who did this. Yeah.
Yeah. So tips began coming in via text. Police traced the number and found it belonged to 18-year-old Katrina. When interviewed, she reported meeting Tina on August 7th, where Tina stated she was 16 and working the streets. Katrina actually went to a nearby police cruiser and told them that there was a little girl out there selling her body,
Hmm.
but nothing was done. And so the new duo hung out, going to a McDonald Youth Services shelter nearby, where Tina checked in under a false name and used the facilities and then got a sweater to keep warm. So again, just kind of in and out of these
Yeah.
locations. When Dawn arrived, a black truck waved Tina down, and realizing it was for a sex act, Katrina again waved down another police cruiser. She's like, no, this is a
Right.
child.
Like she was her mama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, this is a literal child. This resulted in the arrest of the man, but they simply let Tina walk away.
Oh my gosh.
O'Donovan tracked down the police officers who essentially had to wipe egg off their face once they realized this was a missing teenager they were looking for. But I guess she had given fake names a couple times and they could not find these names. And then they were like, all right, who are you really? And she did say her name and how old she was, and that, she's like, I'm just going to go to the shelter. And they just let her go.
Oh man.
And it sounds like O'Donovan was pissed. And I think there's even mention somewhere in the book I read that he yelled, and everybody was super surprised by this because he's normally this reserved
Mm-hmm.
gentleman, and he just went off. I'm like, well, that's fair. I probably would have lost it if somebody was like, oh, I had this person, and then I just let them go. I just let them go. We're looking for her. Everybody's looking for her. She's a missing person, and we just accidentally
Yeah.
let the 15 go on her own accord.
I think, not to give excuses, but I think, I would imagine those cops, are stationed in that area pretty regularly. That's their beat, so to say. Um, and so they probably deal with, sex workers a lot.
Yeah.
And they might have even felt like they were doing her a favor.
Maybe, but Emily, like I said, she did give them her name and her age.
Right.
The age was the big
Right.
thing for me. And they didn't check it out, but had they checked again, they would have noticed her name was actually flagged. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you would be pretty upset for
yeah,
sure, especially thinking that that could have been the difference between her life and death.
it could have
Yeah.
very easily.
Yeah.
So at this point, O'Donovan brought Cody back to Winnipeg and questioned about what he knew. Determining that there was a Sebastian, Cody described a man with a white beard and a funny accent, that they had met up with him on several occasions and he was always in search of scrap metal. They drove Cody to an area he said he was with um, Tina and Sebastian, and Cody picked out an address that they had been. Police saw a tent in the backyard and went to speak with the person who occupied the house. The owner ended up being Tracy Beardy, who answered the door and verified she was the owner and asked if Sebastian lived in the tent. And she reported it was a man named Frenchie, but that he matched the description Cody had given.
Mm.
Speaking to Tracy's sister, 15-year-old Chantel confirmed that Frenchie was also known as Sebastian. So I guess Chantel came to the door and was like, "What's going on?"
Mm-hmm.
Chantel also said he was creepy and had a proclivity for looking at young girls in a weird way. Still, with no identity in hand, police went to the local scrapyard. It was there that a woman at the front desk identified him as Raymond Cormier. Finally, they had a name and a picture thanks to police database.
Wow.
Raymond had a rap sheet for theft, robbery, breaking and entering, and assault with a weapon. CCTV footage finally showed the potential stolen truck near the Mir Hotel where O'Donovan believed Tina to have been dumped from. The footage was from August 10th, right around when she would have been dumped. However, it was grainy and no discernible faces or confirmation it was the right truck could be made.
Did they see, I mean, I guess, did they see someone taking stuff out of the truck? Like,
No, but they think it was just in the area. I don't think that there was pictures down
oh,
at the
I was
water.
going to say, there probably wasn't video of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could just see a truck drive through.
Yeah, still it was a lead that they had. And on
Mm-hmm.
September 17th, the truck was located near Portage Avenue, abandoned, and so it was brought in for forensic testing. Since Raymond was still out there, he was added to Crime Stoppers Most Wanted. I told you, O'Donovan's not messing around.
No,
He's like, no, we're going to
he's
do
on it.
this.
Yeah.
We're going to get this.
I'm really impressed by like the police work that's gone into this so far.
Yeah. Then a jailhouse informant came forward to say that a man named Cormier told him he had sex with Tina, that he felt distraught after learning of the girl's death and thought that Raymond might be involved. And it sounds like the two did like some deals together before he ended up in jail. And the guy didn't even, he's like, I don't even want anything. I'm just giving you this information.
Mm,
They ended up having to move him, I think later we'll talk about it. They had to move him so that he could identify Cormier. And he's like, don't house me near him. He'll know it's me.
right.
But he didn't ask for anything. He didn't ask for like a lighter sentence or anything.
Wow.
Um, so he gave them an address that he believed that he frequented, and police went to the house and saw a man walking out the back, only to realize it was Raymond Cormier.
Mm-hmm.
Raymond was arrested for outstanding warrants and brought into the station. Raymond was interrogated without success for over an hour before being allowed to rest. And after a brief pause, he was interviewed again, this time requesting to speak to a lawyer. After which the interviewing detectives took his clothes. Then he was taken to a cell and he was charged with the lesser crimes that they knew of, including resisting arrest. This only gave detectives about 10 days until he would be released
Oh, wow.
again. I know, because then you're like, oh, now I'm on, like, the clock is ticking.
Yeah. And for sure, he's wily.
Oh, yeah. And
You
in
get him
many,
out of your grasp, he's gone.
yeah. And in many reports and sources, they all say that he was like detectives and everybody was super surprised by him because while he's like a drug addict, he doesn't act like your typical, like he's very cunning when he's doing all these interviews and
Yeah.
he's very closed off and he knows what to say without incriminating himself, without slipping up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that must be so frustrating. Where you're like, just say the thing.
Yeah. I mean, lived probably a substantial amount of time in his later life, like wheeling and dealing. So
Hmm.
he knows how it's done.
Yeah. Luckily, a local supermarket reported a previous theft in a meat market where the suspect used a screwdriver as a weapon, and the video proved it was Raymond. So he was able to be charged with that, which gave the detectives about 45 days.
Okay.
In the
Phew.
meantime, Donovan obtained a search warrant for DNA and collected it. At the end of November, Raymond was telling police he knew who the killer was and wanted an interview. The interview was conducted on December 1st, 2014, and Raymond attempted to lead them on a goose chase for a biker gang, but the detectives basically, they didn't buy it. They took
Right.
down the information, ran the leads, but they knew it was pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Instead, they went back to the house that he'd been staying at in the tent in the yard, and Ida and Chantel Beardy both saw pictures of the blanket. Um, so they had taken one of the photos that somebody had sent in
Uh-huh.
of this like Chloe green blanket and brought it out and were like, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" And they were all like, "Oh, that's Raymond's blanket." Or they'd be like, "It looks like it's similar but a little more faded,"
Right.
essentially.
Right.
But they were all identifying it as the correct. And one of them even said like, "Oh, that's the cover thing." And they're like, "What?" And they're like, where you put the blanket in and then you zip it up,"
Uh-huh.
confirming it was a duvet cover,
Right.
not just a blanket that looked like it. Um, then so he took the photo of the same blanket to the jailhouse informant, and again, he too confirmed Raymond had that blanket. But still, this is just circumstantial evidence that they have
Right.
so far. With that, winter faded to spring, and with no new leads were produced, and O'Donovan just couldn't let the case go cold. So he went to his boss and he put in a request to use the Mr. Big strategy. This is where um, they put in like a profile of Raymond, and they find an undercover officer who they think would match kind of a person that Raymond might befriend
Yeah.
after a chance meeting.
Yeah.
Um, and they basically get him to like get involved with Raymond and then start to bring Raymond into nefarious activities and into this gang. And then at some point, they'll be like, we've heard rumblings that you're involved in this and we need to know what's happening so we can
Right.
protect you, and try to get him to admit
Yeah.
what is happening.
I've heard about this in other cases, and
Yeah.
it's a very fine line that they have to walk too.
So it is. And at the time, there was backlash in the US for similar strategies that
Right.
were being done. And so they had to put out like a very specific plan on how they were going to do everything
Yeah.
in order to kind of get it pushed through. And it was a pretty big budget to go
Yeah.
as well. But because of the profile of Tina's case, and I mean, again, like this is national attention. Everybody's freaking out. They were like, "Yep, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do something.
Right.
We can't let this go cold or there's going to be riots in the
Yeah.
streets." Like everything's already very tense. Um, so a man named Mo was picked out as the informant, and a female undercover officer, Candace, was his part-time girlfriend. And they secured housing, which they reported to be part of a new offender release program. So, like, this
Mm.
building was like, "Yep, you can have our building for this,"
Yeah.
which is insane. Like, the
It,
amount of cooperation that they got is wonderful.
the like the energy and effort it would take to be those like the officers doing this
Yes.
is like they deserve Emmys.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. And Candace, I guess, so she picked out like the type of person that she was going to be. It would be like borderline kind of look like a hooker, but not
mm-hmm.
quite. She a little more relaxed than that, but
Yeah.
definitely dressed down. But I guess she said it looked sure her face and her hair and stuff still looked too much like herself. And so when she would go to actual work, she put on like a pregnant belly and put on a wig so that she wasn't recognizable, just in case Raymond happened to go by her when she was in her real outfit.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that is insane.
It's insane.
Like, she's like, "I'm just going to put this pregnant belly on to change my appearance enough that you wouldn't think it was her."
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it worked.
I would help me probably get out, like get into a character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if
Yeah.
I changed myself that much, like I don't think I would be inclined to slip up ever.
Yeah.
Like I would easily be able to rub my fake pregnant belly and feel like I am Candace.
Yeah.
Like feel like I'm this woman.
Well, no, the pregnant belly was when she went to work. She
Okay,
went
so when
to
she
work.
wasn't Candace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so because of the housing, this would ensure a meeting of Mo and Raymond. And on June 13th, 2015, Raymond was released. The next day, when he showed up for his employment assistance office, the caseworker told him that he may be eligible for free housing as part of
Mm-hmm.
this program. And for months, Mo worked with Raymond, including introducing Candace, for whom he seemed to have a fondness for. Then they also brought in a younger looking Jenna. Jenna and Mo at one point get into a simulated fight one night, and Raymond was called to help get rid of her. So she um it sounds really funny if you read the book that kind of contains all this information, but they get into a fake fight, of course, and they're like throwing things in the apartment, and she had like all these fake bruises and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to put so much like makeup and stuff into it. Well, as they're throwing stuff, I guess she like Mo accidentally like cut himself for real, but then just like threw the blood like to make it more real.
Uh-huh.
And then so Jenna gets into it and she ends up cutting herself for real too. And they're just like they're going with
Oh my
it.
God.
And they fought for a while, and Raymond's not coming to the apartment door to find out what's going on. So at one point they do like this huge bang, and then she lays down on the ground and pretends to be out of it.
Uh-huh.
And he Mo goes over to the door and is like beating on the door, and he's like, Raymond, and gets his help involved, and they like I think they rolled her up maybe in a carpet, or they just picked up her body and she had to pretend to be
Like
out of
passed
it.
out, like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
so I guess she made like even like gurgling noises
like
to make it sound.
agonal breathing
Yeah,
and
and I
yeah.
was like, "Do you know how hard that would be?" This girl, and I think this was like her first undercover stint, and she was like fresh out of the academy, just this young officer who managed to look like she was even younger than, because I think she was only early 20s, and so they made her look like she was either 19 or a little bit younger. They wanted the younger look.
Uh-huh.
Um, but Raymond actually would be like, "Man, you just need to get rid of Jenna. Like, Candace is this good girl."
Right.
And they're like, "What? What?" But he like so Raymond just like picks up her body, and so she's again, you have to act limp. In
Right.
movies you see people hold their head up.
Yeah.
You can't actually hold your head up in real life. Like
Yeah.
the head's gonna hang. And so she's doing this, and Mo has like this van already ready to go because he's in this organization
Uh-huh.
supposedly. And they like throw her into it and shut the doors, and it takes off, and, and just like this whole thing. But they're like couldn't get him to come to the door until he went and got him.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm just like thinking, like, I imagine, or I would at least, if I was any of the people, the detectives working on this would be the only story I ever told at bars when I was
I
out with
know.
people.
Got to play a dead person.
Like, and I would be so close with my
Yeah,
counterpart, and I would like constantly be referring to it. Everyone would be like, God, we got to separate them. Like,
yeah.
they are like,
That's the one thing you did, guys.
yeah,
Calm down.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like, what have you done since then?
yeah.
Like,
And yeah. So I guess he was really good about, um, Raymond was really good about like the cleanup and what they had to do. And then he was like, they don't know anything about it. Just don't open your mouth. But still, he, hinted at things, but never about Tina, but
mm-hmm,
still never admitted to killing her. From there, he was introduced to the gang leader Jay, another obviously undercover officer.
mm-hmm,
And about 16 months after Tina was killed, the team decided they needed to do one last operation. So this went on for months. And Donovan's like, I think we pushed this as far as it can go. He's still not admitting to things. Like, we
mm-hmm,
can't just keep this ruse forever. And Mo had been like escalating Raymond into things like, they would get supplies from somewhere that they had, stolen, and pack them and send them to Jay, and they would do all these things to get like Raymond more and more into this
mm-hmm.
group, and they met with Jay, and they had like a couple lavish evenings where they took him out and met all of these people. I'm like, how many people did they get into this like undercover situation, which is
It's
insane.
insane.
Um, but like everybody was schmoozing him,
Yeah.
and trying to like, and they're like, oh, I heard you did like this good favor for our friend Mo, and
Yeah.
like hinting at, the murder of Jenna, because
Right.
he ultimately, Mo comes back and is like, oh, she didn't make it. And he
Yeah.
was like, well, just make sure she's never found again.
Oh
Like,
my God.
you know, um, and so, they ended up bringing Ray to British Columbia for a large operation. There, they pressured him, saying that their dirty police officer knew they were looking into him and that they were close to an arrest. He began to unravel and like took off. So he was like smart enough to realize that there was a ruse happening. Like he's like,
Oh,
"Oh, how do you know?" Like, or at least it was his paranoia, but his
yeah.
paranoia was correct at this
Uh-huh.
point. Where he's like, "How would you know all this? Like, who are you really?" And then
Oh,
just took
oh
off.
my God. Could you imagine like a
In
year and a half of police work and then,
this,
oh my
yeah.
God.
So eventually he was taken down police, and after a review of all the information obtained over the months, was indeed arrested for the second-degree murder of Tina Fontaine. On January 29th, 2018, the trial began, and Raymond, of course, pleaded not guilty. The trial lasted for 3 weeks and was considered a circumstantial case. Witnesses of days leading up to Tina's death were called in, those that recognized the duvet cover, conversational witnesses, and more. And again, the jailhouse informant was brought in. Some of the testimony of the recordings were also brought in. And at the end of 3 weeks, the jury was sent to deliberate. And a little over a day, on February 22nd, they came back with a verdict. Raymond Cormier was not guilty of the
Yeah.
death of Tina Fontaine.
Yeah.
And I guess,
I was sort of feeling that.
yeah, I guess they didn't use everything that O'Donovan had put together in like this packet, and in the book, they kind of talk about it, and he's just like, well, they thought that they used the best of the information, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe if they had put all of it together, maybe it would have done it, but it's a very circumstantial case
Yeah.
at best.
I mean, my understanding, like the more we talked about that Mr. Big situation, the more like all of these little like things kept coming back in my head about other scenarios that
Yeah.
they've used it. And it's like,
Well, everything's being recorded, but he doesn't fully admit to anything
right.
in
And
any of them.
it's such a like, there's been lawyers who have argued like this person like thought there was a big mob boss that needed information from them. So like they were getting luxury things. There was like perks to be associated with this group. And so
They'd say anything.
when they're like now saying, we know you did something, or like, how did you know about all that stuff? They're going to say anything to
Yeah.
try to maintain the lifestyle that they think is about to be given to them. Like,
Yeah.
so it's really, you're like offering a confession under false pretenses
Yeah.
and potentially entrapment. And like, it's just so messy. And it's really like, from again, what I remember hearing in other cases, I know they've tried this in like big drug
Hmm.
cases before. And like,
It's
you're
very specific on how you have to do
yeah,
things, and
it's
any deviation can set it off.
can make it no longer worth it. And
Yeah.
it's just a very risky police action to take because it's costs a lot of money to do and it might not
Work.
get you what you want.
Hmm. So reactions were immediate. Within minutes, Manitoba Indigenous leaders criticized governmental systems for not protecting Fontaine. Quote, we as a nation need to do better for our young people, end quote, said, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. He has a big name. So, Kiwatanoe, the Grand Chief of Shiloh North, and also said, quote, we've all failed her, end quote. And Carol Bennett, Federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, tweeted, quote, Tina's is a tragic story that demonstrates the failures of all systems for Indigenous children and youth on every level.
Hmm.
We need to fix this, end quote.
I was just thinking that the first quote you read there is like, this is like, it is a failure of systems.
Hmm.
Like the fact that she was involved with, I know it's not CPS, but it's similar.
Yeah.
I forget the
CFS.
CS or CFS, like that they should have been accountable
Hmm.
for keeping track of this young girl. And I know kids are going to run away and things like that, but like you had so many opportunities to protect her
Yeah.
and
And
like
they all
make a
failed.
better plan, and
Yeah.
it didn't happen. So,
Yeah. I'm also surprised that the hospital wasn't able to hold her with all the drugs and stuff in her system.
right.
Like, I'm like, oh, she's only 15 and we still can't hold for safety. Like, at
Yeah.
that point, you're like, was it suicidal? Are you doing it because you're suicidal?
And I mean, so I like have dealt with a situation with people in Canada before, and like truly it was this girl like tried to like she was not well. She was
Hmm.
not well, and I was going through like, well, they're going to hold her for like 72 hours at the hospital, and like then they'll hopefully at that point like just demand that you're asking for these resources and you need the like community as soon as you get out. They let her out of this hospital within 8 hours, and
Hmm.
they gave her a contact card for a ministry
Yeah.
in the neighborhood.
Yeah. It's not like here where we hold. I know.
Yeah.
The day after the trial ended in February, more than 1,000 people gathered to march in honor of Tina and support her family. A month later, the Crown decided not to appeal the case. Her trial happened to coincide with another trial of a man who shot an Indigenous man at a farm. Just before Raymond's verdict, this man was also found not guilty,
Mm.
but the spotlight was on. As a result of her case, there was an establishment of a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In June 2019, the inquiry found, quote, that the country was complicit in a race-biased genocide against Indigenous women, end quote, which is a very strong thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, a report by the Manitoba Child Advocate found that Tina was failed by the systems meant to protect her, especially the Child and Family Services. They recommended 5 improvements, quote, improving victims' support services for children, developing safe, secure home-like treatment facilities where children and youth could be placed involuntarily if needed, improving the care of sexually exploited children and youth, improving mental health support, and conducting a review of how school absenteeism is dealt with, end quote. From the Canadian Encyclopedia, Fontaine's death launched volunteer group the Red, which searches Winnipeg's Red River bottom for bodies or evidence in missing persons or homicide cases. Tina's death also led to the creation of the Bear Clan Patrol, which promotes safety and crime prevention in the city's North End. A short term crisis intervention program for youth at risk of sexual exploitation operated by Indigenous staff began in Winnipeg in the fall of 2015. On November 5th, 2018, the Indawa Youth Resource Center, which had been operating for 25 years, was renamed, quote, Tina Safe Haven, end quote, in memory of Tina Fontaine. With federal funding, Tina's Safe Haven began operating as a 24/7 youth drop-in center. Quote, this place will always be here for kids, and no one can get lost now, end quote, said Thelma Favell, Tina's great aunt.
Hmm.
Raymond Cormier was found dead on April 3rd, 2024 in Ottawa.
Hmm.
And that is the end of this case.
Wow, that was like just a few months ago.
I know, for Raymond. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I guess he kind of lived, I mean, the same life that he had been living. He left the area, obviously. He
Yeah.
was found in Ottawa, but um, nothing other, nothing, no other serious crimes have been associated with him.
Yeah. He, oh man.
I know.
I like they didn't have enough.
No, they didn't, unfortunately. But
And like your circumstantial witnesses are like probably not, you know, highbrow citizens that you're bringing in to testify, which I hate to say, but
yeah,
they are letting this guy camp a meth dealer or like camp out in their backyard. I would imagine they're not.
I don't think so. I think they were actually good people. Chantel said that that Tracy had a habit of kind of taking in those that she thought really needed
Mm,
it
okay.
and was like a generous person. So
All right.
don't go that far.
I know, but I'm just thinking like the power to try to bring this guy down without like a legit evidence
I
to
know.
back it up is really difficult. It's too
Yeah.
bad that the like mitochondrial DNA didn't match or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, mitochondrial is not as good as other sources of DNA because it can give you like a relative, but
Right.
it's not going to be as precise. So
S-
I know, I know, I know. So technically, her case has been solved at this
Yeah.
point, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.